Good day, everyone. Richard Cowperthwait for Northwest Access TV. Thanks for joining us for another show. And very happy to have alongside for the first time, I guess, Denise Smith. Denise, the Executive Director of the Vermont Council on Rural Development, longtime St. Albans resident. You've worn so many hats, Denise, and I can't wait to get into some of these, but welcome to the show.
Thanks so much.
Good to see you, and actually a busy time. We're taping the show on good old Friday, June 13th.
Yeah, it's Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th. Boy, anyway, and of course you've got your daughter graduating from BFA tomorrow or Saturday or Sunday?
Graduation's tomorrow at 11.
Tomorrow at
Yeah.
11. Wow.
Yeah, it's going to be indoors.
How many kids graduating in that class? You got a rough number for me?
I have no idea.
No idea.
I
I
think
have no idea.
I don't know, maybe.
And our producer, Alan Cunningham's got one of his kids graduating too, so big day.
Yeah.
Any particular speaker, guest speaker for this, or?
I have not heard anything.
Haven't heard,
I mean, I have an
yeah.
18-year-old. She doesn't talk to me that much,
Is
Richard.
that right?
She's
Interesting.
not allowed.
And congratulations to your daughter off to the University of San Diego next year.
Yeah.
Or in the fall.
Yeah, in the fall. She'll
Wow.
be leaving at the end of August. We got to get her out there by
Wow.
the 27th. So,
And where
yeah.
your husband, Mayor Tim Smith, logged some time in his during college too, huh?
Yeah, he was there for a year. I think
For a
he
year, I
left
think he said.
University of New Hampshire. I think it might
I
have been a
didn't
different. it's a-
ask him after that, actually.
Yeah, Southern New Hampshire University. Went there for a couple of years and then went to USD.
Wow,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
So again, VCRD, Vermont Council on Rural Development, we'll be talking a lot about that. You've been on board with those guys for how long now?
Started in September,
Started in
so
September.
not quite a full year.
Yeah, so almost getting
8
towards a
months.
year.
Yeah, getting towards a year. Yep. Yeah.
And they've had a very high profile in Franklin County. I mean, Swanton, Highgate, Montgomery, Fairfield come to mind, and have you done a lot more than that, or am I
Just
right?
did Franklin.
You just did
and
Franklin.
They were finishing Franklin kind of right when I was starting the interview process.
Okay.
I know they've done Montgomery. Montgomery's, they've I think they've done 6 out of our 14 towns in
So
Franklin County.
wow,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yep. Yeah.
And again, I guess, start us off, tell us about the organization. I'm sure some folks, and one of your former colleagues I interviewed, I think, when the organization was dealing with Highgate.
Okay.
But tell us about yourselves.
Yeah, so VCRD, Vermont Council on Rural Development, is a statewide nonprofit. It was actually created in the 90s when Howard Dean was governor.
No, really?
I love the history of this organization.
His idea, or just during his administration?
It was during his administration. It was actually part of the Farm Bill.
Oh,
So
no,
the
really?
federal Farm Bill,
Really?
and they established councils throughout America.
So every state has one?
Yep. They all had one when there was funding. So probably 5 years.
One of my questions.
So probably 5 or 6 years in, I think the federal funding went away. But it was originally part of the administration as a pass-through organization, and really the charge of the organization was to convene rural Vermonters around issues that are important to them, and then bring them back to the federal government, and hopefully we can start working on things together.
Interesting.
And then in '95, I believe it was, we became our own 501c3, and just really interesting things that they were talking about back then, water districts, and when you look back through the notes, and what they were focused on, arts and culture in Vermont was one of them. And then in '97, we did our first ever community visit, which is one of the things that we're most well known for across
Absolutely.
the state, and that's what you referred to earlier, of things that we've done up here in Franklin County.
Yeah.
And I think we've done it 6 out of our 14 towns in Franklin County.
So
with
about half
with
of
those
Franklin
community-
County.
About half of Franklin County with those
And
community
again, folks
visits.
have to, and you can't force it, you can't say, hey, we're showing up tomorrow. You've got to be invited.
Yeah, it's a process. Typically what happens, though, is somebody hears about us, whether it's from my husband's organization, like a Regional Development Corporation, or the Regional Planning, Regional Planning. They might hear from us, like somebody on the select board.
Sure.
And they, or even a neighboring town. I think
Sure.
Fairfield might have been the first town that we did one in up here.
Interesting.
Although, no, we've been in Richford. Richford was our first
really?
community visit in
Is that right?
1997.
Wow,
Yeah, we're coming
interesting.
on to our 30 years of community visits.
I mean, was that the first one in the state, or the first one in the state, not only Franklin County?
First one in the state
Oh,
was
really?
Richford. Yeah.
Interesting.
We've done it twice now.
Huh.
We've been to Richford twice now.
Wow.
And we'll do that. We'll repeat if a community
Oh,
says, 10, 15 years later, like,
is that
hey,
right?
yeah,
You'll repeat.
we'd love you to come back. This is how far we got on our first plan.
Interesting.
Can you help us with our second community visit?
Is that the only repeat in Franklin County that comes to mind?
It's the only
apparently?
one in Franklin County. We're about to go back to Brandon this
really?
year, and that might be I think I've heard it might be our third community. We've done over 90 towns in Vermont at this
Really?
point.
Wow.
Yep. And I'm hoping to hit 100 by our 30th year, which would be not
To
quite
succumb-
half of the towns in
not,
Vermont.
not far away. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
And what about, you mentioned towns, cities too, or is it,
No, we'll do cities
Do
too.
cities too. but mostly towns come
Mostly
down? There are
rural-
not too many cities in Vermont anyway.
Yeah, but if St. Albans City and Town wanted to work together on, we've done Bennington, actually Bennington Town, they're 10 years out now from their community visit. Randolph is just a smaller city,
Yeah.
town. We did a community visit through our climate economy program there 5 years ago.
It's funny you mentioned Randolph. I've never, of course, home of Vermont Technical College or whatever part of Vermont State University.
Yep.
I've never dealt with Randolph. The only way I know it is from stops on the Vermont or on the train. That's one of the stops. That's
Yeah.
the only time I've ever really dealt with Randolph.
It's such a
Sounds like
great,
it's got some life to it.
such good life there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're having well, let me go back to your first
Sorry.
question about being invited.
Yeah.
So what typically happens is we'll get an interest, a phone call, and then we go to a select board meeting.
Yeah.
And share our programming, what we do, what we offer,
Yeah.
how we're structured. And if the community is interested, then the select board has to invite us to do a community visit. We really want to set this up so that it's really successful.
So a formal
Invitation, yep. And then we have an advisory committee, and we do this once a year, where we look at all the requests that have come in. We also work with the Center for Rural Studies at UVM to develop a community profile for us.
Yeah.
So that we can review all of that with the advisory committee. Our capacity to do community visits is 3 per year through the community visit program, but we also have a climate economy program, and we do a resilient communities, which has a very similar process, because our process is it is economic and community development at its best,
Yeah.
where we come in and facilitate a process for the community. The most recent one that we did for that was in Johnson. So if you've heard about the Reimagine Johnson process.
I guess I have heard of
Yeah,
that. Of
and
course, I
that-
saw the move of the
the
library
move
late
of the
at night a little while
library,
ago.
the new general store that's just
Right.
opened.
Right.
Those were all results of that
Really?
Reimagine Johnson, and they're really thinking about how they're adapting to the climate change and the flooding that they've been experiencing the last few years.
So you folks were much involved in that.
Yeah, we ran that process, but that was through our climate economy. So to get back to the question, we typically do 3 real fit community visits a year, and then we have other funding streams to do some other work in communities as needed and as
Yeah.
invited and as requested and as capacity allows. We have about a 2-year waiting right now for the community visit
Oh, is that
process. We have
right?
more interest than we have ability to be able to meet
Yeah.
at this point in time.
Flashing back to John, Duncan Hastings is an old friend of mine. I was a former town administrator in Johnson. I think he's on the select board these days.
Okay, yeah.
With former Franklin County.
Okay,
guy.
yep, I do
And
remember
actually,
seeing that name.
he was George's, I think, town administrator for a while
Yep,
too. But
yep.
a name that comes right to mind with
Yep,
Johnson.
yep.
Boy, it sounds like a lot of things. So again, 3 community visits, 3 towns
Yep.
a year.
Yep, and it takes, from beginning to end, I will say it's about a 5-month body of work for our team.
Yeah.
Obviously not every day, all day, so some of our
Yeah.
team has other roles in the organization, but we do typically, from the time we approve, we go into a planning meeting with the community.
Yeah.
And then we do, our first community visit is the next month. And that is really that community visit is probably the best one. We get a ton of people to come to
And
it.
again, everybody's invited to that. I think
Everybody's
there's some
invited.
food they can look forward to.
Yeah, we typically get dinner for everybody.
Yeah.
And we do a really expansive opportunities and what's working well in your town, what
Yeah.
assets do you have.
Yeah.
The framing's incredible. We typically do forums on topics that were really important to the community.
Yeah.
They could be around resilience, they could be around recreation, communication, and information sharing
Yeah.
is one that typically comes up. Infrastructure comes up a lot.
I bet.
And lots of things within the community come up all the time. And so we typically frame it in 4 different forums, and then we facilitate a conversation around what's working well, what opportunities are there for change, or what could be better, right?
Yeah.
And then what ideas do you have in terms of like moving to action? From that, we pull all that information together, everything that we hear. Again, we're recording the entire conversation for the
Wow.
community.
Yeah.
And then we come back with a reflection of what we heard, with typically 16 to 18, and so that's a month later.
Wow.
We come back with poster boards of all the information that we heard, and about 16 to 18 things that the community could take action on,
And then try to whittle that down, narrow that down some.
to between 2 and 3.
Oh, really? Two,
Yeah,
two.
2 to 3.
Just too much to try to do too much kind of.
Yeah, so it's really a process of like
Wow.
identifying assets, what needs work, and then helping people kind of organize themselves around some really important topics to the community.
Yeah.
Nothing else goes away. There's still, everything else in that report still
Yeah.
exists.
Yeah.
So people can go back, but what a town typically does is create action teams around an issue that they
Yeah.
want to address.
And a
then
task force, I think it's Swanton Task Force, kind of the
that's-
same thing.
Yeah, that's what it's called, action teams,
Yeah.
task force.
Huh.
And then we work with them on finding a leader, coaching. We might come back and facilitate the first couple of meetings if that's needed from the community.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that they need, however we can support them. And then we produce a report. So after the 3rd visit, we come back and do those action teams. And then we produce a report, which usually arrives about a month and a half after the visit's over.
Huh.
And we
That's in a written document.
written document,
Good
yeah.
old written document.
And it's also archived on our website.
Oh, really?
I think I said there's we've done 90 towns to date.
Yeah.
And all of the reports, all of the visits we've ever done are archived on
Oh,
our
is that
website.
right? So you
yeah.
can get all that info.
All that
I
info.
probably should have done some research
That's
like that.
okay. That's fine.
Oh, that's
it's
great.
well, to me, it's also I was a history major at UVM back in the early 90s. I don't want to date
Hey,
myself.
nice to be hanging out with such a young person, yeah.
But the archive that we have of the state of Vermont and rural Vermont specifically, and
Yeah.
what was happening in the towns.
Sounds like an incredible, great asset.
It's a great asset.
Because the legislature, I would think other state, bodies would get some use out of stuff like that.
Yeah, we and the reports are there. You can download them.
Yeah.
You can call us. We actually have printed versions of all of them
Really?
from the past. And then another role that VCRD has served throughout the state over the last 30 years is really a convener of statewide policy questions or statewide. How do I want to put this? Statewide issues or opportunities. So we held the commission on broadband.
Really?
Early on, creative economy. We did the Future of Vermont report. We most recently did the Vermont Proposition right before COVID.
Huh.
We hosted the Working Lands opportunities, the Vermont Values. So when you go to our
Wow.
website, you can also see these reports that exist from all of the work that we did. And those are typically year-long convenings of Vermonters and people in the state that either have a lot of knowledge, interest, or are thinking about policy actions that the state of Vermont could be taking to move some of these projects and issues forward for the state of Vermont.
Boy, you're sounding, I knew you were involved in a lot of stuff, but I'm hearing way more than I guess I realized. What are your 3 towns? You're dealing with 3 towns now
Yep, all at different times. So what typically happens is we have one community visit and then it flows into the next one. So we just wrapped up Roxbury. Was our
Roxbury.
one at the beginning of the year. Roxbury's right near Montpelier for
Yeah.
people, for geographic,
Yep,
people
thank
that
you.
like geography,
Yeah.
because sometimes, where is that down? We are currently in Sunderland,
Oh, yeah.
which is south and near
I
Bennington.
was going to say, not too far out of Bennington.
Not too far out of Bennington. We're doing a custom process right next door in Wyndham, which is funded through we're just doing we're calling it a two-step, where we're just doing a visioning and a resource identification, and then moving right to action. It's a shorter process, but just as important. So we're doing Wyndham. And then we're going to go to New Haven, which is in Addison County.
Yeah.
And then,
Far out of Middlebury. Yeah.
yep, and then Brandon, which is in Rutland County.
And you said Brandon will be a repeat. You've dealt with Brandon in the past.
Yes, we did Brandon before their big renovation, like their big downtown or town.
Yeah, it seems like I
change.
was slogging through there for a few years.
Yeah, yep, and they've invited us back, and it's good timing for them and for us. So we're going to go back and help them address some of the issues that are emerging, and I guess the opportunities that are emerging in their community.
Tell
Yeah.
me about your staff, Denise. You're exec director. How big is? We're not talking a real big staff here, are
No,
we?
it's pretty small,
Yeah.
but it's bigger than it's ever been.
Yeah.
So we have 9 people, including me, in the organization.
That's about. Yeah, that's probably about what I would have guessed.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's bigger. And funding is that, boy, just seems like everybody's got funding issues. Is that ever more difficult? Are you faring, if you've gotten bigger, I guess you're faring okay with funding?
Yeah, we definitely have some project funds. So we have money specifically designated for specific projects that we're working on. One that I haven't talked about yet is the Village Trust Initiative, and I can
yeah.
talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah.
So that we have a full-time staff working on the Village Trust Initiative, but like any nonprofit.
Yeah.
If there's a project that aligns with our values and our vision and our work,
Yeah.
we might say, hey, we're willing to do that. We just wrapped up the Working Communities Challenge, which Franklin County benefited from with the housing work that Barry Lamke was doing. So, and there were 7 regions throughout the state of Vermont that received that funding to do systems change work. And we were the facilitator of that. So again, like that was funding that came to us for a short period of time to do specific work in the state of Vermont.
And again, we're talking state funds here, federal funds, mix?
That came from
Local?
that was a bit of foundation money, as well as the Boston Federal Reserve, the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston.
Oh, really?
They were the ones who came to Vermont and said, hey, we've done this work in urban areas. We'd love to do some work around systems
Interesting.
change in rural areas. And so we worked hand in hand with them in Vermont around that. Yeah.
Do fundraise, is that part of you? Or do you do private fundraising too? Is
all
that
the
All the time?
All the time. We have a lot of longstanding foundations. We have a lot of Vermonters who valued our work over years, who donate to us. We have a summit coming up in August, and so we do some fundraising for that. We have a leadership program it's called the Vermont Community Leadership Network, where we offer workshops on Zoom currently, hoping to maybe expand that program a little bit so it's more in person over the next few years. So yeah, we do fundraising. We have foundations that we apply to, and then we also have just Vermonters that will send us the $25 or $50 checks that we adore.
Interesting. Out of the $9 billion state budget, none of that kind of official Vermont budget money goes to you guys?
We
or-
do get a little bit
Get a
from
little
so over the last, I think, almost decade, the Northern Borders Regional Commission
Okay.
grants have
Yeah.
been helping to support our community visit program.
Okay.
So some federal money there. But then we also get a little bit of a match from the state of Vermont to help support the community visit program.
Wow.
And that's been very much appreciated and needed. And it's been a pretty stable amount of funding for us. It hasn't gone up or down but it really does help us meet that match that we have to come up with for the Northern Borders grant.
So funding, I'm sure a bit always a struggle for probably everybody out there, but it sounds like you fare pretty well. I mean, if your staff's gotten bigger, but
Yeah,
always an
again,
issue.
it's all project dependent, so there may
Yeah.
be that, we hire people for projects, so when the project ends, we may have to lay off. I
Right.
don't like calling it layoffs, but yeah, so hopefully we find more money to do more work.
Yeah.
There's no shortage of need for the work that we do, I would say, in
yeah.
the state. And we're statewide, so that's
Yeah.
been fun for me to get back into a statewide role, and get back out to all the communities.
Your job itself, I can only assume multifaceted. Are you involved?
Yeah.
I mean, what about the community visits? Will you get involved with that, or is that going to be typically other staff folks? Are you involved in everything?
Yeah, so we do have a director, we have a program director of the community visit
Okay.
program, Alyssa Johnson, who's doing a really fantastic job. She does all of the work for it, and then I step in and show up at the planning meeting or at the
Yeah.
first meeting and just greet people and talk a little bit about VCRD and why we exist and what we do for the state of Vermont.
Yeah.
And I will facilitate a process. I might be a note taker at one of the meetings
Really?
if that's needed. We all kind of pitch in to
Yeah.
help
Huh.
at the meetings when needed or when called upon.
Yeah.
But I might facilitate one of the forums. And then, it all depends on what the team needs.
And I'm glad you mentioned the word facilitate. I mentioned off air, I was talking to somebody yesterday about this interview and said, yeah, these folks are very good at enabling in a positive sense, thinking that word is just such a pejorative word these days, especially with crime stuff comes to mind, someone's enabled somebody.
Yeah.
But facilitate's probably a better word, but that seems like the heart of what you guys do.
Yeah, it's the heart of what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about the island, Grand Isle County? You've done some towns in the islands?
I don't. Yeah, I would have to
I
go.
just
I
happened
have
to
not
think of Grand Isle County.
seen, huh?
Yeah, I just happened to
I
wonder about the
know.
islands.
Yeah, I don't know that we've done anything in the Grand Isle yet.
I'm sure it'll happen at some point,
Yeah,
probably.
there could be a moment that I'm feeling like South Hero might have actually popped up on my
Oh,
list. Yeah. There's so many towns, and I have not had a chance to read all of the reports, but I'm trying to remember. I think we might have done South Hero.
Yeah.
I'd have to go look.
You have a headquarters in Montpelier?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Our office is right actually next to the State House. It's
Oh,
on Bailey
really?
Ave, Bailey in the corner of Bailey and Baldwin.
Interesting.
So,
Decent headquarters, decent.
yeah, it's an old Vermont
Is that right?
home that's turned
Flooding-wise,
into
did you
an
survive
office.
flooding okay?
Yeah, we're high up enough that I think the river didn't touch us.
Boy, it's funny. Speaking of flooding, I read some papers online finally, although I much prefer holding a paper in my hand.
No, me
But I think it
too.
was a Washington Post story I came across this morning about just some of Vermont's flooded communities. It was a story mostly centering on Barry
Yeah.
and how just some of the poor folks who were hoping, I guess, the city would buy their, get into the buy my house and give me money so I can get out of here. And of course, cities, well, we're trying to help you, but we don't want to lose all our tax base. But it was kind of a Barry story on that. So flooding, you fared
Yeah,
Okay, you're
our
high.
office fared okay. Montpelier obviously is also one of those
No,
communities
sure.
that is dealing with flooding. So there's been actually some work. One of our former employees, John Copans, runs the Montpelier flood
Oh, really?
recovery and response.
Boy, what an issue! Just such a discouraging issue.
It is
among
definitely
many.
one of the issues that we are facing throughout Vermont and the communities that we're working in, and something that we think a lot about as an organization.
Yeah.
We have Laura Cavan Bailey, who's
Huh.
our director of our climate economy program, and the resilient communities work that we're doing is
Yeah.
born out of the community visit program, but where we go into flooded communities who have potentially been recently flooded.
Yeah.
I'm thinking Plainfield might be the next one that we go
In
work
fact,
with.
Plainfield was mentioned in the story I just
Oh,
mentioned.
yeah. Plainfield's another one where they've been hit the last 2 years, the same place. And
And Johnson, we talked about Johnson with your work
yeah,
there. Boy,
we did
just some
reimagine
tough
Johnson.
times.
Yeah, tough times. But I think one of the best things about this job, I consider myself lucky,
Yeah.
and my staff does too. We just get to see Vermonters at their best,
Yeah.
thinking creatively, wondering about opportunity,
And that's certainly what you're pushing him to be thinking about also, to the extent you can, right?
Yeah, but they're really,
Yeah.
it's really, village making is a really important thing
Interesting.
in our state. And
Yeah.
there are so many inspiring people that live here
Yeah.
that are coming together as communities to really think about who they are and who they want to be.
Yeah. Have you had, I mean, it sounds like you've done very good work. Obviously, your work in some towns works out better than other towns.
Yes.
Have there been any just kind of towns that just, just it didn't work out at all? Can you hopefully get something positive? And obviously,
gosh.
there's a range of, again, I mean, I know Franklin County pretty well, but it sounds like the where you work in Swanton and Highgate, I still hear about. Anyway,
Yeah,
I guess.
I would say, it's one of the questions that we sort of are asking after 30 years of doing something,
boy, 30 years.
Yeah, we're hosting our board retreat in Randolph this year.
Yeah.
Which Randolph is calling, which is the heart of Vermont, right? It's right in the center.
That's right. I was under that impression. That is correct, right? It's the geographic center of Vermont.
Geographic center of Vermont. So
Yeah.
they have this, the heart of Vermont is kind of their tagline and their logo.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, and so 5 years ago, we did one of our model community resilient communities processes there. And they have implemented a lot of the things that they identified that they wanted to do in Randolph and now are doing, which is one of the reasons that my board member, Erica, who's the Regional Development Corporation person down there, was so excited about us coming because she sees Randolph kind of as a case study of like how and why did what we do in Randolph work so well that now the things that they identified are coming to fruition. A new daycare, a new hotel was just built there.
Really?
We have they're doing a housing project downtown. They took a historic shopping block and have recreated it and have made it so that now there's like storefronts that people can rent as opposed to one big open space that it was a historic department store, I think. So in 2 weeks, that's where we're hosting our board retreat, and we're going to see all these different things that they've done. But it's a really the question that we want to ask the panel, kind of as like a case study, like what is it that happened?
Why was this so successful in Randolph?
What happened in Randolph that made this so successful? Whereas another community, we might have done a community visit and nothing happened. Lunenburg is another one that actually was the first, when I first started my position, that was the community that we were working in. Lunenburg Gilman is up in the Northeast Kingdom.
Yeah,
right?
I've got a camp up that way.
Oh, you do?
Yeah,
Oh,
half
right.
owner of a camp on beautiful Little Averill Lake, but I love the kingdom.
Gosh, really, when we say this, but every town we go to, we just want to move to because it's just the best town in Vermont.
In
But
fact, an old friend
Lunenburg-
of mine, I know you probably Vince Saluzzi, do you know?
I know
You
Vin,
probably know
yeah,
Vince.
yeah.
Everybody knows Vince, but he's of course still state's attorney in Essex County.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
saw Vince the other day, in fact.
Oh, you did?
Interesting, but no, yeah, I love the kingdom.
Yeah.
And actually, just as an old, literally old media guy, it's nice to see the Chronicle as print newspapers kind of fade away, but the Chronicle, Barton Chronicle, but the Orleans County Weekly paper still has some life to it.
Still has
Still a
some
pretty
life.
decent paper.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's fun to keep up with unfortunately, one of the papers across how many papers die out every day these days? But the News and Sentinel out of Colebrook, New Hampshire, that's gone now.
That's
but
gone.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So Lunenburg. So yeah.
So
the kingdom.
Lunenburg and Gilman, we did their community visit, and they are thriving. We were just up there helping
Really?
to support some of their follow-up, and they're doing like on our website. There's a story about Lunenburg that we just published. Our newsletter's coming out today.
Oh, really?
So if you're interested,
What is your website?
it's www.vtrural.org.
vtrural.org.
And you can find everything on
Oh,
there.
really?
And our newsletter, if you're interested, you can
Yeah?
sign up for it on there as well.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Really. And how often do you do your newsletter? Like monthly or?
Now, every other month, we put out
Every
the
other month?
VCRD one, but then we also have a Vermont Community Leadership Network newsletter that we put out on the off months. So we do kind of a leadership update, and then we do the VCRD project
Oh, yeah.
update, I guess I would call it, more of like what we've been up to.
Interesting. I'm just not again, I'm a dinosaur, and that gives me way too much credit.
I know.
But I don't do social media, so every once in a while there'll be an event around here that I don't hear about because, used to be in the paper or something. Has that been a problem for you with at least print media fading so much, or you still get the word out? You've got ways to get the word out? Do you get as much publicity out there as you want, do you think, or never as much as you want?
Never. It's always a challenge. We use Front Porch Forum a lot
Okay,
in smaller towns and
is that right?
communities if they have it and it's useful. Some, Facebook, obviously social media is
How's
something.
that in St. Albans? Again, I hear references to that. Is that pretty useful around here? Is that
Front Porch Forum?
Yeah, is
Oh,
that
I
a
think-
good?
Yeah.
I guess
think
I should hook into
you
a
should
few
hook
of these
into-
things.
Front Porch Forum's nice because you can sort of, there's just really,
In fact, my buddy Zach Scheffler, who used to work at, isn't Zach a Front Porch Forum? I think that's.
I don't know if, is he there? Is he at Front Porch Forum?
I'm almost thinking that's it, but I might be wrong. But anyway, Zach used to work out here.
Yeah.
Anyway,
exactly.
so that's a pretty good source.
Yeah, that's a good source. We do mailers, we do lawn signs, we do a lot. We do banners, we make phone calls. We
really?
are still making, and it's not
Really?
us that's making the phone calls, but the community members will call their friends and neighbors.
Okay.
Texting's been really popular.
Okay. Texting was
Yeah,
what
like,
kind of
hey,
I
come to
live
this
on.
meeting.
Okay.
And that's the one thing about VCRD, I think that, we have these systems pretty down pat at this point.
Yeah.
And different things work better in different communities, but we always ask the community, what's going to work here? How do you reach your neighbors? And we typically get
questions.
10% of the population to come out to our meetings.
I was going
So-
to ask you that how well you do, because it's it's a meal and stuff. It's
It's a
good stuff. So about 10%.
10%.
Well, I guess that's given what town meeting turnouts aren't much more than that. Certainly, typically, probably not. I mean, for actual real town meetings, I went to Franklin's last town meeting day. So I mean, that's not much lower than a typical town meeting, probably.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'd like that to be more, but that strikes me as not a bad
It's high.
number.
It is one of the best attended meetings, I think,
Yeah.
in the state.
I bet.
And then we also do a survey. We'll go and do specific forums. So we'll do a youth forum. If there's a group that's been identified by the community that might have a harder time getting to a public meeting, we'll go and meet with them. And then we also offer a Zoom option if people, if the community really thinks like, oh, people won't come, but they might get on a Zoom forum with you. We've offered the Zoom forum kind of at the same time.
So you routinely still do Zooms, or just if a community wants you to do it?
If a community wants us to do it,
Okay.
yeah. During COVID, we could not do a
I was
lot
just
of
going to say,
in-person.
so COVID, where did COVID kind of change your
It
life quite a
changed.
bit?
It did. I was not there, but that
Before
actually is
you.
the Vermont Community Leadership Network. The webinars that we now offer actually grew out of our COVID pivot that we had to do. But yeah, we couldn't do in-person meetings for a while, which our
Obviously,
whole
boy, that's kind of your.
our whole
big
thing is
thing.
based on being in person together in
So
a
did you? I
room
mean, you did some of that remotely.
We-
As best you could without being there in person.
as best we could
Boy,
without
what
being there
a
in
drag! I
person.
mean, that sounds like a huge part of your,
Yeah.
MO. Like,
Yeah, yeah, but we did learn how to do hybrid. I mean, we're really good at
Really?
facilitating hybrid meetings now,
Fun.
and learning kind of the ropes of that. And it's just everybody had to pivot during that time. So,
do you like some lobbying time? Do you spend any time with the legislature, or is lobbying? I mean, just for funding and stuff, or is not? You're really not. Sounds like that wouldn't be something you'd really be doing, or wouldn't be getting anything out of.
we do. We host the Working Lands Coalition now
yeah.
as an organization. So we
Yeah.
have a bunch of organizations working on ensuring that the Working Lands Enterprise initiative, which is money that goes to farm and forest businesses for succession planning, if they're pivoting, if they need a piece of equipment to grow. We advocate for that funding to keep our working lands, which is one of it's a value of Vermonters based on the work that we've done. It was identified in our report on the future of Vermont. And so that is one piece of work that I've had to jump into this year. So I am back in the State House, and that's been really fun and interesting. So that's one thing. The other thing we attend, which is something that we started years ago, is the Rural Caucus. And so that's people in the legislature who come from rural areas. Lisa Hango is the
In fact,
co-chair.
you took her name out of my mouth.
Yeah,
And I saw Lisa at one of the legislative breakfasts a while back, and unfortunately, I just don't deal with those folks as much as I'd like, but I purposely just went up to her and said, I'm impressed. I know your job means a lot, and I know she's involved with that, but.
yeah, she's the co-chair, and it's a independent, a Republican and a Democrat, so there's 3 co-chairs of the Rural Caucus.
Really?
And so we've been very intentional this year about participating in the Rural Caucus, and one of the things that we
cool.
weighed in on that, again, we are now, I would say, our team is experts on what's happening in rural Vermont.
I bet.
Because we go to communities and listen to what's happening, so
Sure.
we have this understanding, and so we can show up at the legislature and share what we're hearing from rural communities. And
I was going to say, I would think they would like to hear from you folk, and they do, so you do get invited in for at times.
we get invited in. One of the pieces that we were invited in on this year was the rural schools, and as there could be escalation.
Glad you figured all that out, Denise.
No, we have not figured it out, but we are hearing from communities
Yeah,
that they're concerned with the school closing. One, the social impact that it has on the community,
Sure.
but then 2, the building and the implications of what happens to that infrastructure.
They shut down.
They shut down.
Yeah.
My chair is from Bennington, the chair of Vermont Council on Rural Development, and she works for the city of Bennington, or the town of Bennington, and one of their big issues right now is Ben High, which is a high school that was closed over 20 years ago.
Oh, really?
They are now renovating it, so they've got a developer, they're renovating it, they're putting housing in, they're gonna have a recreation.
Really?
And it's coming back to life. But because there was no plan when it closed, it's taken that much longer for that project to get off the ground. I mean, the momentum, right? So if you can prepare and plan and support before the closures happen. And so that was one of the things that we stepped in to talk with the legislature about in terms of what's happening in rural communities and how they're thinking about their schools. And it's not just as easy as the town buying the building for $1.
Yeah, bet.
There's feasibility, there's assessments, there's things that need to happen ahead of time.
Yeah, I get a lot of those stories from the Chronicle, just Northeast Kingdom, small towns, just a lot of concern up there about, hey, you want, consolidation is maybe the way to go, but geez, our small towns love their small schools and stuff, but.
Right.
Rep. Leanne Harpel, I guess she's a teacher, she's a rep up there and stuff, and I think she was all set to vote for the one form of the education finance bill, but I think was just getting enough concern of locals. I think she went the other way on that,
the
but
other
boy,
way.
talk about tough issues. I'm glad.
Yeah.
I wish the legislators good luck. I guess they're still struggling with that as we speak, pretty much.
I think so. I don't know. There was supposed to be a
Even
vote
meeting
in the Senate today, but I don't know that
today,
I haven't
maybe?
heard anything of whether or not it's happened.
Boy, it sounds like there are a lot of issues you get involved with.
Again,
You feel like, and you get, I'm overwhelmed just talking about some of this stuff. Do you feel like at times you're kind of taking on too much or kind of pushing it a little bit, or I guess such is life, huh?
yeah, I think our team is really strong. We have a really great group of people working at VCRD. I think that, we don't necessarily take everything on. Again, we are like a reflective listener. We're a facilitator of
That's a good word.
process. And we're there to support rural Vermont communities in making things happen and achieving their vision.
Yeah.
The thing that I would say happens, which is, we do the community visit, and people always ask me, well, what, you got all these great plans, and like, what then happens?
Yeah.
And one of the things that we identified, I think, early on with this work is how important key leadership and leaders are in communities to really make things happen. And that's one of the pieces of this case study of Randolph that we're hoping to really drive home for the board, is without leaders, the report just becomes a report, right?
Yeah.
The visit just becomes a visit.
Yeah.
And it was great, and people showed up and had meetings, but then nothing happened.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that VCRD has developed over the last few years, which is why one of the reasons I was so excited to be asked to invited to take this position, was
And kudos. I was so impressed when I heard that, and I hope we can spend a few minutes on the incredible array of good jobs you've had. But anyway,
I mean, this is my dream job. Like, really, I worked with
so
VCRD.
did you work with them? Did you work for them before?
I never worked for them. I did apply for a job once with them, and I
Oh,
didn't get
really?
it.
Interesting.
But I VCRD was formed while I was in college,
Right.
and so it's kind of like.
Did you know about them soon after they were formed?
Yeah, when I came
Really?
back, from Peace Corps.
That's
I
right,
did. Well, I
you
did
were
know
Peace
about them.
Corps, but
Yeah.
wasn't I guess the late Dick Horrigan? I think we lost Dick. Wasn't he Vermont's first Peace Corps member, the state rep? Did you know Dick Horrigan?
I did. Yeah.
I think he
did.
told me. I think
Yeah,
he said he was Vermont's first
He was
Peace Corps.
one of Vermont's first Peace Corps
Yeah.
members. Yep. Yeah.
And where were you in Peace Corps?
I was in Mali, West Africa.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's so long. It feels really long. Right after I graduated from UVM, I stayed in Burlington that summer, and then I went away.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, you were. Did you do Peace Corps?
No, I didn't
you
do. No, you're way ahead of me.
way ahead of you. So, why did I just bring Peace Corps up?
Well, I probably brought it up with. Anyway, so you knew VCRD.
Oh,
early,
right. So I
early on.
came back, and I was
After
working
Peace
at the
Corps.
Chamber of Commerce in Burlington.
Huh.
And then went and worked for economic development for the state.
Oh yeah.
And we were working with VCRD on the creative economy, because economic development at that point was sort of shifting away from industrial manufacturing. And what are some other, what was emerging was this idea of creative economy, and like drawing in graphic design firms and people to like that are part of the creative economy. And I think Bellows Falls at that point was really identifying itself as a haven for artists.
Oh, really?
And White River Junction was kind of in, so and
Interesting.
VCRD was sort of holding these forums around the state on the creative economy. And that was like one of their statewide policy pieces that they did. Which actually to this, now the Vermont Arts Council, and I'm a member of the Vermont Creative Network.
Oh yeah.
Which is an advocacy group and group to help support the creative endeavors in the state of Vermont,
Oh.
and creative industry, creative businesses.
Well, I keep mentioning job. Why don't we get into that a little bit?
Okay.
And of course, I can flash back to when you, not that my good friend Dave Handy loves his yoga. Never done it. My former housemate Sherry Seitzma.
Oh,
I
yeah.
assume you probably knew Sherry.
Yeah.
But again, for years you were a yoga instructor for a number of years.
Yeah, I left the state, and when was that? I don't know, kind of right around the time I met
Where'd you grow up, Denise?
I grew up in Quebec, actually, in
Oh, really?
Deauville, right outside of Sherbrooke.
Oh, is that right?
Yep.
I've still never been to Sherbrooke. My camp's not even that far away from
Oh,
me.
Sherbrooke's a great
Yeah.
city. Yeah, it's awesome.
Wow,
If you're camps up there, you should take a
Yeah, I
tour.
should. It's not, I think it's within an hour.
Yeah,
of
it's
my camp.
there's a really great hill. Anyways,
Yeah.
so I grew up there, and then but we moved back. Both my parents were from the Northeast Kingdom,
Oh yeah.
Orleans and St. Jay.
Wow.
So we moved back. My dad was a professor at UVM, so we
Wow.
moved back and lived in Charlotte. I grew up my like teenage years, I guess, from 7th grade on, were in Charlotte, Vermont.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I went to UVM and then did Peace Corps and then
Peace
moved
Corps.
back to Vermont after that. Yeah. And then I went to work for the chamber, and then I went to work for the state in economic and international trade and development, which was really tied to my I speak French, so Canada.
So you're bilingual.
I'm bilingual,
Well,
yeah.
So impressive. I've only been living on the border for 50 years now. I can read a slight bit, but
You gotta want it. You gotta.
My kid seems to be making progress.
Oh, good.
He's
Good.
like some time in Egypt, did the Arabic program
Oh,
through
that's
Middlebury
awesome.
at Bennington College a couple of summers ago.
Yeah.
Went to school in Italy, so thank you, son. But good for you. What about your kids? Have your kids picked up on that at all?
Not really. No.
Not really.
No,
you haven't pressed them on that.
No, I mean, you really have to speak it a lot, almost to speak it all the time for
Do
them to
do you
pick
end up speaking it? I mean, do you end up? Are you
I
able-
don't.
You don't?
Not
Just don't have
really.
much of an occasion to do
Yeah,
that?
not
Oh,
really.
sorry, I did that
That's
the
all
other day, too. Thanks.
No, not really. Not much of an occasion. And they would get mad at me when they were little when I tried to speak
Oh, is that
to them
right?
in French. So yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. And my French is like, it's a second language because my mom was but it was not her maternal language. It was
yeah.
my father's maternal language,
Yeah.
but it was not my mom's.
Huh.
Yeah. So anyways, yeah. But then we moved. Grew up in Charlotte. Worked for the chamber. Worked for the state.
Yeah.
And then really kind of wanted to start a business. So I started a yoga studio
That's
in
right.
St.
It sounds like you did very well with that. That was for a number of years,
Yeah, I did
right?
it almost eight.
What kind of yoga?
It
It's
was
a-
hot yoga. Yeah, it was
hot
hot.
yoga?
Yeah, so the room was heated to about 102. I still teach.
Right.
I
Oh,
teach at the
really?
Williston Hot Yoga
Oh,
Studio now.
do you
Yeah.
really? I hadn't even heard
No.
that term before. So hot yoga?
Hot yoga, yeah, you'd love it. It's great. If your
Interesting.
body is creaky and sore, it's the
Really?
best remedy for pain. Yeah,
Interesting.
it's
So what
amazing.
came after, I can think of, well, of course, you made a legislative bid, ran for the
Yes, I
state senate
did. I
at one
ran
point
for
with
state
Caroline
senate.
Bright.
Yeah.
Caroline was about to move back up
I
here.
just saw
that.
that. I know.
Yeah,
It's
Katie, our
exciting.
friend Katie on staff here picked up on that, I guess, on
Yeah.
Facebook.
Yeah, is she moving back to Franklin County?
Yeah,
We
moving
heard-
back to her mother, Jennifer, at her Anna Neville's house on
yeah,
Georgia
yeah,
Shore.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
they're just like a
great.
week or two. In fact, it's funny, Caroline's married to a good guy, Joel, who's a Philadelphia cop.
Oh,
Tendered
okay.
his resignation, but and he's also a JAG with the Vermont National Guard. I
Oh,
guess when they were thinking they'd end up back how he had picked up his law degree. And it's funny, in fact, I mentioned, I'm going back a few shows with your husband, Mayor Tim Smith, and mentioned off air that Caroline was coming up and her husband's a Philly cop and was probably going to be looking for a job up here. Tim said, Richard, have him call Dominic.
I'm
Wow.
sure, yeah.
Anyway, so I suspect Joel can pick up a police job pretty quickly. But anyway, so they're bad. So anyway,
So
and you
glad to,
guys
I was,
ran.
I was so glad to see that, yeah. So
No,
we-
that was a solid effort. Was that right after the term after Senator Cattell had retired, I think?
She ran then, I ran after that, so I
Okay.
did not run that race.
But I mean, after I think the term after when it was an open seat.
Yes, it was an open seat.
You and Caroline were the two Democratic candidates.
No, I
am
ran,
wrong?
ran with Sarah Cattell. Sarah
is that
Cattell,
right?
yep, and she wanted to get back in it after Caroline had lost.
Oh, really? Yeah, don't mind my memory.
Yeah, it was an interesting point, yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But was that a pretty good experience, even in a losing cause? Is that
It was a hard experience.
hard. I can't
And
imagine.
I
I've interviewed a
commend
million candidates.
anybody, I
I
commend
can't imagine running.
I commend so many people. Yeah, I commend people who do it and lose and do it again. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, it was a good experience, hard. It was really, what I loved about it and what I'm so grateful for is just the opportunity to meet all the people in Franklin County
Yeah.
that I got to meet.
And I'm sure you met a ton of people.
Met a ton of people.
Most of whom I trust were pretty decent people to deal with. So,
Amazing.
and so no door. Of course, I just interviewed John Edwards, and of course spent some time on his pro-civil unions vote in 2000. That of course cost him his job as a Vermont legislator. So yeah, John had some doors thrown in his face.
Yeah.
But it was a pretty good experience campaigning.
Yeah, campaigning was fun. Lots of
Yeah.
parades. I learned all about the parade routes
Oh.
and where to go.
Interesting.
It was fun. That was 2016 was that race. I ran
Yeah.
then.
And then what, Rise Vermont? I know, again, I may be missing a bunch of things, but you're hooked into Rise Vermont?
Yep.
Is that still with us?
It is not.
It's not.
No, I mean there's iterations of it. I think around the state in terms of
Yeah.
like public health policy and population health work that's being done. So Northwestern Medical Center was overseeing that program.
Yeah.
Rise Vermont. It was really a public health movement, I guess I want to call it, that was to encourage healthy lifestyles.
Right.
In our communities in rural Vermont.
You feel like did you feel like you were pretty successful or reasonably successful with that? Or?
Yeah, I think it was
Yeah.
a great
Really?
job. We had a great team of people. We did a ton of work in schools. We did
Yeah.
a lot of it was, I'm just going to name this,
Yeah.
community and economic development through the lens of health outcomes. And so, we worked on policy change, breastfeeding friendly cities. We worked on developing sidewalks and improving parks, and Amy Brewer. I don't
Sounds
know if
like, yeah, I certainly know of.
Yeah.
Hey, gotta love Amy. I mean,
Love
how
Amy.
many tens of hundreds of thousands of cigarette butts has she and her folks picked up?
Yeah.
Better people than me. Good for
Yeah.
her.
Yeah, I was overseeing Healthy Roots at the time because Healthy Roots was at the hospital, and so that's our food systems program in Franklin County, which is now at CVOEO. But really, that was about encouraging local buyers to buy local Vermont farm products, and really developing a food shed and a food system in Franklin County, which continues to this day.
Yeah.
Anyways, a lot of great work was done.
It sounds
through
like a good
those
program.
few
Was
years.
it just funding kind of disappeared, or
It was COVID fund. Yeah, the hospital was.
COVID didn't help, obviously.
COVID didn't help. The hospital was going through tough financial situation. So we and also I would say the champions of the program left the hospital as well. So then things pivoted, and I became the director of population health at NMC, which was really overseeing a lot of the relationships between the hospital and primary care and the Blueprint program, which you probably know about. That's a
maybe vague reference. But
essentially the Blueprint. I'll just give you a quick one,
Thanks.
but we get
Thanks.
money. The Blueprint program, and Jessica Frost has my
really?
role at the hospital. So
Okay, great person.
She was a great person. The Blueprint program basically gets money from the insurance companies, and then we take that money in and redistribute it out to the primary care offices and substance use disorder facilities to support MAT, medical assisted treatment, as well as the care managers in primary care. So those are all the people that are helping to coordinate care for patients, and the social workers in primary care.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's like a lot of good stuff. So what happened after RISE went down? What'd you do after that? Don't remember Friends of Northern Lake Champlain?
That was before RISE.
was before
FNLC
RISE.
was before RISE. Yeah, that was
Another sounds like great organization.
Yeah, I call it my gig economy work.
No, in fact, my old friend Paul Madden, I think, was one of your Paul and I go back to we were farm mates at Duke University.
Oh, you were?
Just a few years ago.
Okay,
Paul and I go back a lot of years.
Yeah, the Friends of Northern Lake Champlain, what a legacy organization that is. It was started by
Still
the
going,
Tylers, still going.
And of course, the Birdie and Bridget's.
Bridget's
I should try to grab Bridget one of these days.
Yeah, because she also did the Cold Hollow to Canada project
Oh,
for
is
a
that right?
while. So
Oh,
she was the
wow.
executive director of that. I think she was
Wow.
the first one that Nancy Patch started.
Nancy, a great old friend of mine.
Is she? I love
Finally
Nancy.
succeeded as Franklin County Forester by a guy who I should grab. I think he may be out of my hometown, Charlie Hancock, who, I've never met Charlie.
He
succeeded Nancy, right?
You got to have him
Because I'm
on
hearing
the show.
he's out of Hingham, that's my hometown on the South Shore of Boston, and I've never met him.
He just got our Community Leadership Award last summer at the
really?
at the
Well, that's
summit.
another. You got his number? I take his number.
I'll
if
give you
have
his
it.
number. He's one of my. I went up and had coffee with him right after I started my
No,
job.
he
I had to
sounds
give
like
him
a tremendous guy.
such a great guy, and just so kind. And
thanks.
smart, and he's doing, so Montgomery is one of the towns that we did a great community visit in.
And they've got some big time issues with the wastewater
Yep.
issue in the center
Yep.
and stuff.
Yep, they want to do a really, I think it would be transformational for Montgomery
Right.
to do this wastewater project. And then they're also doing walkability and movability
Wow.
project with sidewalks and bike lanes.
Wow.
So, yeah, a lot of great
Love
vision
Montgomery.
up
Never
there.
lived there, but I go back to Tim Murphy and the my one watering hole long ago. I love Montgomery.
Love Montgomery.
Not to mention beautiful terrain too.
Oh, it's so pretty up there.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Friends was even before Rising Vermont. So after Rising Vermont,
That's when
Or
I
after Rise in Vermont?
Yeah, that's when I
Whatever.
became the director of population health. Worked with the hospital on COVID response,
Okay.
both vaccine clinic as well as testing.
Wow.
And then did the Blueprint program.
Okay.
And started the ACH, which is the Accountable Communities for Health program.
Wow.
Which we don't call it that, but anyways, it was a health equity grant that I worked with Aaron Creeley at the State Department on.
Okay.
The District Department of Health. And then from that is when I got the role at VCRD, which is where I am now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Boy, Denise, I'm impressed. So I mean, a lot of good stuff there. Back to VCRD. Any Franklin County again? The three towns you're doing, not Franklin County. Anybody on deck in Franklin County, or you don't get too much ahead of time?
We have some, I think, I don't know that I can actually share that information. I'm
Yeah.
wondering about that. I might not
That-
be able to share that.
That's okay.
I'm
Don't-
gonna,
don't
I'm
share.
gonna,
I
I'm
don't
gonna
wanna-
plead
I
the
don't want to get you
fifth.
fired or
I'm
anything.
gonna plead the fifth. Yeah, I don't want to get fired.
But you always have like the three, kind of know the next towns, you try to do
Yeah,
like a
we
year.
typically, we start getting letters kind of over the year, and then we also have like a bank of towns that have already asked us. And so then we sort of have to like navigate where people are at, what they're looking for, what our capacity is. We also navigate geography where, we were just in Franklin. We also did Westmore.
Oh, really?
Up on
Boy,
Willoughby.
talk about beautiful, talk about a spectacular place in Vermont, huh?
So amazing, yeah, beautiful. Anyways, so
I guess they've had an issue again, courtesy of the Chronicle. I guess the tower, there was a company that wanted to put a big tower. It sounds like that's been a big issue in Westmore. I don't know if that came up with you guys.
That didn't come up. The main thing that
Yeah.
came up with us was really the speed along the road.
Right.
Also, people have discovered Willoughby now and in Westmore, and so there's a lot more people coming. And their question
Right.
is really, how does a town, a community that
Yeah.
needs resources, kind of get access the resources that are coming to the community, but not really giving them anything. And then the other thing was the speed along the road, and the wake boats in the, so it
that's,
really, it was around recreation. That was like the big issue up there, was kind of like the recreation.
No, wake boats, I'm on top of that. My camp partner
Are
is Larry
you?
Stenick. I don't know if you'll know
Oh,
Larry.
yeah, I know
Talk
Larry.
about a great guy. Thank
Yeah,
you, Larry. Talk
yeah.
about the key guy at our camp.
Yeah.
But he's on, I guess it's Averill Lakes Association.
Okay.
And the wake boat issue is a big issue for those guys.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, so anyway,
Interesting.
so those were things, I'm trying to remember, I mean, again, I was like interviewing at the time of the Westmore visit.
Yeah. I think that what I mentioned, I think, is maybe a pretty new issue.
Yeah, okay, so, yeah.
So does sometimes at these community visits, you're on top of so many things, so are you surprised once in a while that a particular issue will come up that you wouldn't have thought about? Is that maybe nothing particularly comes in? You probably have a pretty good handle on stuff. And again, most of the issues town to town tend to be pretty similar issues, or I mean, obviously towns are different, not necessarily, I guess.
So, that is a great question, and what I
We're
would
down
say.
to about three minutes, too.
3 minutes, okay, what I would say, and what my colleague at the Preservation Trust of Vermont would say, I would say that this is what I told him the other day, because we
Yeah.
just did a village meetup in Reading, which if anybody has time to go to Reading, it is one of the
Really?
best examples of a really incredible 19th century town, and it
Oh,
has
is
the
that right?
Hall Arts Foundation there now.
Really?
Which is a New York style gallery. And
Really?
what I say is
Yeah.
every Vermont town that I've been in has its own unique personality.
Sure, I bet.
And during that planning meeting, you can really get a sense of the personality of that community.
Yeah.
And what my colleague Ben Doyle said from Preservation Trust, because he's a former English and history teacher at high school. He would say that every town is like a 19th century character in like a
Really?
Dickens book, right? Like in a novel, and they all have a role to play. So that's sort of like
that's great.
yeah.
That's
So
great.
it's they have similar issues, I guess I would say, with very differing ways of solving those, and have a personality that really comes from their history, how they were settled, where they are. A mountain town's very different than a lake town.
Yeah, I bet.
And sometimes, it's very unique, I guess, and that's what's been really interesting for me to look at that through this lens, through my new lens that I get to really.
Yeah.
I'm so lucky to have this opportunity to do this.
As I mentioned, just some of the issues we've talked about with the legislatures grappling with, again, just seems so difficult to me, but I guess I'm expecting when I ask you about if you're, the future of Vermont, and if you're pretty optimistic, I suspect you're going to tell me that. You have despite some just really tough issues, you got a pretty good feeling about this, our beautiful state and its future. And again, I tend to be a glass half empty guy. I'm sure you're a very glass half full person.
I just think we got to get out. You got to get out. You got to see the general stores that are being built and
Yeah.
saved. You got to see the the people that are like rolling up their shirt sleeves. I mean, Vermont's always kind of lived on the brink, right? We are a state of doers. We are a state of inventors. We're a state of creators. And I think we have to like really dig deep into that spirit that we have. And we're a state of, we are a human scale state. I
No,
know
that's-
you,
that's
you
right.
know me, you know my husband who's the mayor, right? Like we are human scale, and so we can still rely on each other.
No, it's great. Just as a reporter, very quickly, just in my reporting years, it was so nice if I could get the governor once in a while, but I wouldn't have layers and layers of bureaucracy to go through. So as a background media, I hugely appreciate that.
Yeah, that's who we are.
Anyway, well, it sounds like, Denise, you covered a lot of ground. Great to have you on the show. Hope to have you back sometime.
Love to come
And again,
back.
for folks, towns who like your services, give these folks a call and
Yeah,
get on a
yep,
waiting list or something.
Yeah, we have a great team. We'd love to work with you. Love
Very
to work
good.
with anybody.
Very good. Denise Smith, the Executive Director of the Vermont Council on Rural Development, VCRD. Thanks to producer Alan Cunningham. I'm Richard Cowperthwait. Thanks for checking us out here on Northwest Access TV. See you next time.